Today on the Andrew Cooperrider show, Senator Lindsay Tishner pointed out a story that's not getting enough coverage regarding the teachers unions dumping money into a Supreme Court race. We'll go over why that is. Fayette County Public Schools suddenly, with Amendment 2 on the ballot, has found money for new magnet schools. What are magnet schools? Why are they doing this now? We'll go over that. And then as long as we're on the topic of the school choice amendment, a Lincoln KY story regarding the school choice amendment cites superintendents that make one of the dumbest statements I have read so far on Amendment 2. But of course, the people who are against the amendment shared this article out with absolutely no regard for the fact they literally sound stupid. We wonder why our kids are failing. Well, we will have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. As always, please make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, get other people listening to the show, get other people tuning in. It's very important that we get this show spread far and wide, that we keep people informed, keep our neighbors informed. As always, if you want to reach out to the show, feel free to email info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. You can also reach out to the show by heading over to theandrewshow.com and hitting the contact tab. But without further ado, let's dig down into it. So this past primary, in the Republican primary, the teachers unions in Kentucky did something they'd never done before. They decided to get involved in the Republican primary, dumping hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of dollars into candidates in Republican races that they felt better represented their values. Now, historically, the teachers unions have only given money to Democrats in these races and dealing with the state house for a simple fact that what the teachers unions are looking for, legislators willing to continue to just dump endless amounts of money into public education. I mean, let's keep in mind that we have places like Louisville spending $23,000 a student. I'm not kidding you, $23,000 a student. Recently, the report cards came out for these schools and how they were doing. And there's a school in Louisville that less than 10%, I'm not kidding you, less than 10% of the student body is at least proficient in math or reading. Now, obviously, if you live in that school district and you're forced to send your kid to that school, you've doomed them to failure. You have no other options, no choices, and it's not a monetary problem. It's that, quite simply put, the school gave up, stopped trying. Maybe they have tons of different languages they have to teach. Long story short, it isn't working, and whatever's happening in that school, whatever has broken it, well, continuing to dump more kids into it isn't going to work, but that's exactly what the teachers unions want to do. And why is that? Well, it's a simple system of power. You see, the reason why they dump money into quote-unquote pro-public education, as they would call it, Republicans who vote for this endless spending, Republicans who are against school choice, the reason why they dump money into races such as the one we're going to talk about here, where they're spending money in a state Supreme Court race and other places, is because, one, the Democrats have been losing. They have no power. They're relegated to yelling in a corner, and that doesn't help them, but they need to keep their fiefdoms together. What is their actual interest here? What is it? Is it about kids' results, about how kids are doing in school? Of course not. When you watch Amendment 2 ads even, I want you to listen to what some of them say. Let's take a listen to this ad right here. This is a new ad that the Protect Our Public Schools group has put out. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
When the floods hit Eastern Kentucky, we lost everything. Public schools saved us. It's where everyone could find food and shelter. But the truth is, my public school rescued me long before that, giving me hope and skills to build a better life. Amendment 2 would hurt us. It gives Frankfort politicians the power to give away our tax dollars to private schools, which could force many public schools in rural Kentucky to close. Vote no on Amendment 2. It's not for us.
So that is one of their ads they put out. Notice what it starts with, right? First, they talk about what schools have done to help the community, not in educating kids, but for being there when floods occurred. And granted, I understand what they're saying, but, if we're funding a building, then we need to talk about that. And maybe we should focus on that side of things rather than focusing on dumping more money into ballooning administrators' costs. But other than in the middle, there for a brief second, where she does mention having hope that they somehow gave her by teaching her some sort of skills, it then ends with many of our schools may have to close. But one thing they don't talk about, and actually when you watch their ads, generally speaking, you won't see it too often, I haven't yet, is they won't talk about achievement. They won't talk about how kids perform worse with school choice. You won't hear very much focus on school choice on the students at all. Instead, it's about how are we going to keep these buildings in place? How are we going to keep these schools themselves open? They're not talking about kids' outcome because they know that kids will find educational opportunities. And most of the time, those educational opportunities they find will be better than the public schools, and that's why they don't want to talk about that. They also know that there'll still be kids in the public school. One of the arguments you see all the time, I just saw this the other day. They talked about another state where they put in place, and they said 57% of school vouchers went to parents who already had kids in private school. We should vote no on this. I look at that and I say 43% of the kids now enjoying educational opportunities outside the public school were kids who were trying to find other places. They wanted to move their kids out for whatever reason. The educational system wasn't working for them, but they lacked the financial ability to do so. And by putting in place school choice, they were able to obtain it. That's a positive. But they don't care about that. See, all they care about is the fact that, but there's 57% that were already going, so you're just helping them out. See, this is a classic situation about worrying about your own cup instead of worrying about what everybody else's cup is and doing. It's like this weird kind of, follow me here, okay? Maybe that analogy doesn't make too much sense, but let me try to phrase it another way. So, literally speaking, there has been no evidence that in states where school choice is put in place that the kids in public schools do worse than they're doing before school choice. No evidence. And there is evidence that kids do better. But let's say kids don't do better per se, or they only do slightly better. We just see a slightly better difference, but kids really don't do worse. Well, the question would be, does it not matter? Like, if we can offer school choice and it just gives one child the opportunity to get a different educational outcome than what they would have gotten before, and it literally costs us nothing as far as it doesn't cost the other students anything. Maybe it'll end up costing administrators their jobs. Okay, so what? Maybe schools won't be able to build that new building. Okay, so what? We're not here for buildings. And our educational system doesn't exist to provide jobs to administrators. It's about the outcomes for the children, but they're not talking about that. And so I bring that up as the teachers unions and to explain what they're doing and what they spend on, because they're not spending on people who are putting forward ideas to give kids better outcomes. Instead, they're just spending money, and they spent money in these Republican primaries on individuals that vote against school choice and would continue to vote for more and more money for the public schools. But those elections that they got involved in didn't go well. They lost. Like, all of them. Lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, now they're on to a new thing. And this story is actually brought to my attention because Lindsay Tishner, State Senator Lindsay Tishner out of Oldham County, made a post about why isn't this getting more attention? Because it shows that the teachers union has dumped $200,000, into a state Supreme Court race for Pamela Goodwin. Goodwin? Goodwin. I think it's Goodwin. Against Izzo. Now, for those of you who are unaware, Pamela has the endorsement of, she's on the appeals court now, but has the endorsement of Andy Beshear, has the endorsement of all the leftists, and is getting now $200,000 dumped in by the schools unions. On top of that, she's already raised like $225,000 compared to Izzo's only raised like 20, 30 grand. I made a post on social media yesterday talking about how what elections are coming down to is just how much can a person lie to somebody. That's pretty much it. Can you lie about who you are? I have not personally, any elections I dig into recently over the last 4 to 6 years, they're not about people just trying to get out their policies. They're not even just about trying to convince others not to vote for the other person, that the other person's a liar. What they've turned into, in large part, is how well can I lie about my own personal beliefs? I mean, point in case of this, you saw just about every single election, taking a look at our national election, you have Trump, love him or hate him. At least on the policy side of things, he's really consistent. Yeah, sure, Trump may tell, I guess what you'd call white lies or exaggeratory lies about dumb things that have nothing to do with policy, maybe about crowd size or whether or not he slept with a porn star. Or recently, one of the things I saw was he was at a rally and he mentioned sending your kids to school and they come back transed. And the way he said it made it sound like he was mentioning surgery. Obviously, he wasn't. He was talking about a very real thing that occurs where school districts and schools, including Kentucky, until it was called out, have policies that they'll transition your kids, or if your kids are transitioning at school, they don't tell the parents. And so that's what he was hitting upon. He's 100% accurate. That does go there. And clearly, he doesn't think you go to school and then you come back with, your genitalia chopped off and a chest surgery. He's not saying that. He's not saying you go to school and you necessarily come back with being given medication like hormone treatments. But he is saying, and it is true, that your kids go to these public schools straight, relatively normal, and come home weirdos who suddenly are confused about their gender because they've been pumped full of ideas by people not trying to educate, but trying to indoctrinate. Not trying to teach them how to think, but what to think. Instead, they're trying to teach them what to think. But anyways, my point is that, and Democrats have pointed to that and say, well, that's a lie. Well, not really. But when you go into his actual policies, what he believes in, he's been pretty rock solid. We know Trump has stated he has a problem with illegal immigration. And we know from the results of his presidency, he takes that issue seriously enough that he wanted to do things, build the wall, stop the flow of illegal immigration. He didn't put in place any policies that allowed more immigration, illegal immigration, right? And when we talk about energy policies and he says, I'm for XYZ, well, we know based upon his time in presidency, he didn't just say he's for free-flowing energy. He put things in place to get more free-flowing energy. So when he makes those statements, it's consistent. Compared to Kamala Harris, who's, when it comes to actual policy, is just an outright lying about her position at this point because it's not popular. She has to lie about it. And so instead, she goes ahead and dumps money in and is spending loads of money trying to convince people the thing that she's always said she believed, she now no longer believes. And that's what campaigns are turning into. People who have thought one way, like their entire lives, decided to run for office or run for higher office, have realized that it's not good for the electorate at this point in time to hold those beliefs. The new electorate they're going after, if you're coming for an example, and Kamala Harris was running in California, it's very far left, very far leftist beliefs are a good thing, keeps you in office. But when you're running nationally or you're trying to win, rural voters or blue collar voters over in PA and Wisconsin and Michigan, like she's trying to, maybe it doesn't play as well. So you got to run away from your beliefs. But it's not, you have no principles, you have no actual solid beliefs. You're just changing based on whatever gets you elected to a higher office. And it leaves you questions of, once you get into office, what are you going to do? Because what if when those people get elected that flip-flop their positions, they will view that they didn't get elected because the people voted for them. They will view that they got elected into that position because the special interest had gave them enough money to dupe the voter into believing the lies. And so when you have to lie, when you have to cover up, most of the time you're going to have to spend more money. Not every time. Not every politician who has the most money raised and is done the most money is necessarily the most corrupt, but it's a pretty good indication. When somebody has a lot more money than another person, that leaves you to ask a question. And I say this all the time on the show. Donors in our modern time, especially big dollar donors, these people running out there cutting $2,000 checks, $4,000 checks, left and right. Very few of them are doing it because they believe in something. There are a few. I know a few donors out there who cut some big checks simply because they believe in freedom and liberty and conservatism, but most of these people are doing it because it's a investment and they expect a payoff for their investment directly to their pocket. And so you have to be willing to be bought in order to receive the money. In this case, we're looking at a judicial race where a state Supreme Court justice is trying to be bought by the teachers' unions. You may wonder, well, why are they going there? Well, they haven't had success in partisan races. So instead, they're going to go ahead and dump money into nonpartisan races that could be highly effective. Because let's remember why we even have to have in place this amendment. You see, priorly, our state Supreme Court has read and interpreted our state constitution to mean that we couldn't fund anything outside of public schools, whatever that means. Like, as in we couldn't even fund charter schools. It would violate the Constitution. And, granted, okay, they had that ruling, and that ruling has occurred in some other states. Well, then what the school choice advocates, the people who want more educational opportunities, try to put forward educational opportunity accounts, try to put forward these nonprofits where the nonprofits could only hand out scholarships to means-tested children first. People could donate to these nonprofits and get basically a dollar-for-dollar tax incentive from the state and to go against their own taxes. And then those nonprofits turned around, they could issue scholarships to means-tested children first. And after those all people got scholarships, they'd then turn around and say, okay, now we can offer them, now that we've given scholarships to all the means-tested kids, we can offer them to other kids. And oh, by the way, another rule with this law was that anybody who donated to these accounts could not benefit from them. Their children couldn't benefit. Their grandchildren couldn't benefit. It was not to help rich people. It was literally just a way to provide a tax incentive to help those who literally can't afford educational opportunities to be able to afford more. And this has been done in other states, even states where the Constitution had been read the same way it was read in Kentucky. But our state Supreme Court still said that even offering a tax incentive, it broke from all kinds of precedent that has ruled that money does not become government money until it's physically left the hands of the taxpayer and has ended up in the government account. But what our state Supreme Court ruled in that situation was that somehow taxes you're supposed to pay are still the government's money. And so therefore, if you offer tax incentive, helping in order to encourage people to go outside of public schools, that violates our state constitution. It was a crazy ruling, unprecedented. And so that prompted to say, well, I guess we have to pass this constitutional amendment. We literally can't do anything. But that kind of protection for the schools helps the bottom line of teachers' unions. This is how the cycle works. The more kids you force in public schools, the more administrators you have to hire and teachers, but the more administrators and teachers and everybody else you have to hire, the more people you have to hire, the more union dues go up. The more union dues go up, the more money you have in your coffers. The more members you have of your union, the more power you as an individual have. It's all about power. It's not about the kids' educational outcomes. And so they're dumping money into the Supreme Court race. And there's something else they said that just tells you the exact way they think of these Supreme Court races in a way that honestly is a little bit, I guess you'd call it chilling, right? For an example, here is a quote from the JCTA, that's the Jefferson County Teachers Association president, Maddie Shepard, when asked by Kentucky Public Radio about this spending. They said, citing an interest in making sure there are reasonable, pro-public education, pro-union folks that are in position of power most align with our values. So they're admitting outright that they're supporting a state Supreme Court justice based upon they want a pro-public education, pro-union judge. But judges are supposed to rule based upon the black and white letter of the law. And I think that is something that, and Senator Tishner's right, that is what's not getting enough attention here. We literally have a pack, a group dumping money in, not based upon saying, hey, they're not even pretending. We just want a good justice that follows the law. We want a good justice that protects our Constitution. We want a good justice who protects the laws that are passed. They're not even saying that. They're just outright saying, look, we want a justice that's, when they're looking at cases, is going to rule into our favor. And this is what's made our state Supreme Court so liberal. And it is a very liberal state Supreme Court. Because you have these nonpartisan races, and a lot of times, especially judge races, all it comes down to is money. I mean, let me ask you, do any of you listening remember the name of the last judge you voted for? And if you do, can you tell me why you voted for that judge? See, here's the thing when it comes to judges especially. It's exceedingly difficult to figure out whether or not you want to vote for a judge. It is actively difficult to go in and look at how they've ruled on cases in the past. For the average voter, it's hard to be informed. Somebody has to have money to then grab those cases and fill people in on the details to inform the voter when it comes to these elections. And if one side doesn't have money, which Izzo doesn't in this case, well, then it's a pretty one-sided conversation. On top of that, not only is it difficult just to know even like how they've ruled on things, where you pretty much have to be told by an attorney how they've done and how they've handled themselves. But then on top of that, there is this ethics rule that they're technically not allowed to voice how they would rule on a specific case. So try to ask them. Maybe you want to ask them about, how would you rule on this case about school choice? Well, they can sit there and claim, well, I'm sorry, we can't talk about that. I can't talk about how I'd rule on cases, or I can't talk about pending cases, or I can't, I don't know all the details of that case, so it's difficult for me to be able to issue a belief on that. Like, that's like this weird ethics thing. Maybe you don't think it's weird. I think it's weird. Ethics thing so we're voting for justices, and we're not allowed to know how they would rule on cases. It's very difficult for us to see how they've ruled on cases. And so it's a prime race where a few $100,000 goes a long way. And look at that. You just bought yourself a justice that if they're interpreting something that is surely just the state constitution, nothing to do with federal constitution. And then they end up saying, no, this is the belief. Not only have you crushed a law that you wanted to see passed or you wanted to see gone is crushed, but you've now created precedent into the future in order to force individuals, in order to force future individuals to abide by your overreaching power. This is a real power, real push here. Definitely something that we need to talk about more, and Tishner's right. Tishner's right. Also, if I was you, I'd be careful about voting for Goodwin. I would probably vote for Izzo, based on what I know. But anyways, flipping over now. Fayette County Public Schools suddenly has found more money for offering, they say they got awarded a grant for more magnet schools. This coming from the same school district that literally had to cut art classes due to funding. Now suddenly, when school choice is being fought out in the state, they can offer more magnet schools, which is the closest that the public school has to what you would call maybe more of a school choice opportunity for those who are gifted in particular subjects or particular skills. They can go to these magnet schools that just focus on those things. And I think the timing here is very interesting. Of course, like I said, it leaves questions about why are we canceling. We don't have money for art, but we got money for magnet schools now because we're able to find a grant for that. The timing is odd, to say the least, because that is one of the biggest problems. And I've talked about this recently on the show, where out of Louisville and other places, where these magnet schools within the schools are opportunities for individuals who can't afford private schools that maybe could specialize in a topic to be able to have those offerings. And the lack of offerings or not having enough magnet schools to hit upon those who qualify and would love to be a part of it has left public schools in a position where obviously they're not as attractive to individuals who have gifted children that don't have financial resources, something like school choice that helps them out immensely, which is true. And that's once again, that's part of the reason why I support school choice. Outside the fact that just our public schools a failing, broken system, and it doesn't matter how much money we dump into it. Like I said, we're literally spending $23,000 a student, $24,000 a student in Louisville, and we have schools with less than 10% knowing how to read or do math. Like, objectively speaking, our public school systems are failing. But on top of that, even if they are doing great as far as just getting people to a general ability, having the opportunity for kids who are gifted in certain categories to be able to use those gifts without being dependent upon their parents' ability to pay for it, I think that's incredibly important. Opens up a lot of opportunities to children who otherwise wouldn't have it. And speaking of why our schools are ran so badly, we need but look at what they call a great argument when it comes to, of course, the school choice side of things. This was actually, I saw this shared out by Jason Bailey, who's the executive director of KY Policy. Remember, this is a think tank that we recently discovered is just a information laundering arm for the teachers' unions. The board members involved with the teachers' union sit also on the board of KY Policy, which pumps out these think documents, think pieces, and financial studies that all point to, no surprise, dumping more money into public education, despite it being an endless black pit. And he shared out this link in KY's story about Amendment 2, where he says, Northern Kentucky superintendents speak out against Amendment 2. And this is one of the arguments, okay? This is from the Walton Verona Independent School Public School Superintendent Matt Baker. He said, Amendment 2 is not about school choice. Amendment 2 is about vouchers, and vouchers siphon money from public schools. And through all of this time that I've been watching the arguments about the support for or against Amendment 2, I've seen a lot of arguments that are, maybe lacking of information, misread of data. They're not data-based. They make no sense. Earlier, like I said, I brought up the saying, only 43% of kids going to non-public schools after school choice vouchers are put in place weren't going to schools before. And them saying that argument as if it's a good one, but it's really not. So, I've heard those. But I have to say, this is maybe the stupidest thing I've ever heard somebody say on Amendment 2. And then obviously, they thought it was a really good argument. So much so, it's like the first line of the article. They thought this was a fantastic argument. Amendment 2 is not about school choice. Amendment 2 is about vouchers. Well, school vouchers are a form of school choice. What are you talking about? What does school choice mean to you? Is school choice, does school choice not mean a parent getting to choose where the child goes to school? School choice, does it not mean money following the student? Does it not mean a parent getting to choose where their kids goes to school regardless of where they live and their financial ability to pay for it? So if Amendment 2 is about vouchers, it's kind of like, it's like they're trying to say that Amendment 2, to say it another way, Amendment 2 is not about rectangles. It's about squares. Yeah, but all squares are rectangles. And so they're like, Amendment 2 is about school choice. It's about vouchers. Okay, but vouchers are about school choice. Even though the amendment doesn't say it's about vouchers, if you did believe that, you're still talking about school choice, you dummy. We wonder why our schools are being ran into the ground. We have people who are being paid. I guarantee you this guy's being paid like 6 figures a year to educate children, and he just said that and thinks to himself, well, I just made a really good argument. They're not going to be able to argue back on that one, are they? It's ridiculous. And then he goes, and vouchers siphon money from public schools. Yep, they do. Thank you for stating that. Yes. When a child stops going to a public school, that public school does not receive as much money because they're given money per student from the state. So yes, you would lose money from that kid not going to that school. You're exactly right. And our argument, the pro school choice argument is who gives a flying fig? Who cares? What we care about is two things. Will students have a better educational outcomes or the opportunity as individuals for better educational outcomes? Yes. Will we be able to educate kids better without spending more money? Yes. Will teachers still have their jobs, and even in a lot of instances, in a lot of states where they put in place school choice, actually make more money? Well, of course, kids still need to be taught. Okay, that's all we care about. This is the thing they don't get. They sit around, they're like, but administrators will lose their jobs. And they say that because they care about that, but we don't care about that. I don't care. I don't care if this idiot loses his job. I don't care if this guy who makes a statement like Amendment 2 is not about school choice, Amendment 2 is about vouchers, and then says, that's a good argument. That guy doesn't deserve to be in education. That's the kind of pseudo-intellectual statement that is said by these people. And then we wonder why, like I said, we wonder why our educational outcomes literally suck in Kentucky. Suck. This is how bad our public school system is in Kentucky. This is how bad it is. Okay, this is according to LEX 18's article. They took a look at the student report card. And what they found in science, 34% of elementary school pupils were at proficient or distinguished levels, down from 35%. At middle school is 22%, which is down from 23%. At high school, just 6% were ranked as proficient or distinguished compared to 10 years ago. According to Psychology Today, about 10% of students will experience educator sexual misconduct by the time they graduate high school. A higher percentage of Kentucky's high school students are sexually harassed, sexually assaulted, sexually attacked by their teacher than are proficient or distinguished in science. They're more likely to be sexually harassed than to know anything about science. Let that sink in. Literally. They take a class every year for science. And yet, they're so bad at educating kids that there's a higher chance they're sexually assaulted. It's disgusting and it's gross. Well, y'all, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank you all so much for joining. Back here tomorrow. Hope you have a great rest of your day.